In the final days of September, the U.S. political arena once again faces the risk of a budget deadlock and the possibility of a temporary government shutdown. In this context, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives, declared that the Democratic Party would not yield to pressure, especially as an important meeting with former President Donald Trump approaches. This statement raises a central question. Is the Democratic Party's firmness an effective strategy in negotiations, or will it lead to unforeseen consequences for the U.S. economy and society? This topic not only revolves around maintaining short-term funding, but also reflects how the two major parties shape the balance of power in an increasingly polarized political environment. This video is for analysis and reference purposes only and does not represent any political or media organization. To understand the current event, it is necessary to look back at the historical, political, and economic conditions that shaped the situation. First, regarding institutional structure, the U.S. Constitution grants Congress the authority to legislate and approve the budget, while the veto power rests with the president. This makes the budget one of the most important bargaining tools of power. Since 1974, after the passage of the Budget Control Act, the mechanism of the continuing resolution has been frequently used to keep the government functioning when the two sides fail to reach a final agreement. However, overuse of this mechanism has also paved the way for recurring budget crises. Second, regarding historical precedent, the U.S. government has shut down multiple times. The 1995-1996 crisis under President Bill Clinton lasted 21 days, stemming from disagreements between Republicans and the president over social welfare spending. In 2018-19, the government was again shut down for 35 days, the longest in history, due to disputes over funding for the border wall when Donald Trump demanded the expenditure while Democrats firmly opposed it. These events have left the lesson that shutdowns rarely bring a clear victory to either side, but can inflict long-term damage on public trust. Third, regarding economic conditions. As of 2025, U.S. federal public debt has exceeded 34 trillion USD, accounting for more than 120% of GDP. Inflation, although lower than its 2022 peak, still fluctuates at 3 to 4%, higher than the Federal Reserve's 2% target. At the same time, economic growth shows signs of slowing, while financial markets remain highly sensitive to any indications of political instability.
Fourth, regarding society and politics. American society is witnessing a high level of polarization. Public trust in Congress is at a record low, only around 15 to 20% according to Gallup surveys. Grassroots voter groups are increasingly pressuring their parties to remain steadfast rather than compromise. This narrows the space for negotiation, making it difficult for leaders like Jeffries to act flexibly without being perceived as betraying principles. Thus, the foundation of this event did not suddenly appear, but is the result of long-standing institutional structures, recurring historical precedents, macroeconomic pressures, and a deeply polarized political environment. The current developments can be summarized chronologically as follows. Budget preparation phase. In the final weeks of September, Congress entered decisive negotiations. The Republicans, strongly backed by Donald Trump, called for the passage of a clean continuing resolution, meaning only short-term spending would be allowed without attaching other policy provisions. Meanwhile, the Democrats, led by Jeffries, demanded clear commitments to maintain and expand public health care programs, particularly subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, ACA, and Medicaid. Jeffries' public statement. Ahead of the official meeting with Trump, Jeffries affirmed that the Democratic Party would not make concessions. This was a strategic move to present a firm stance before public opinion in order to strengthen negotiating power and reassure the party's grassroots base. Pressure from the October 1st deadline. If Congress fails to pass either a budget bill or a continuing resolution, the federal government will be partially shut down. In that case, hundreds of thousands of federal employees would be furloughed without pay, essential public services disrupted, and the economy put at risk. Research institutions estimate that a 2-week shutdown could reduce U.S. GDP by about 0.2 percentage points, while a month-long shutdown could cause losses of tens of billions of dollars. Impact on markets and society. Even during the negotiation phase, financial markets reacted negatively. The S&P 500 index fell by about 1% in the week before the deadline, reflecting investor concerns. Small businesses dependent on federal contracts also faced risks of losing revenue. Socially, many voter groups, particularly workers paid through federal agencies, expressed frustration as their livelihoods were turned into political pawns. Comparison with previous shutdowns. Compared with 2018-2019, the context this time is different. The focus is not immigration or the border wall, but healthcare welfare, an issue tied to the livelihoods of tens of millions of Americans. Therefore, the risk of stronger social backlash is real if either side is seen as disrupting healthcare benefits. All these events show that, before the meeting with Trump takes place, Jeffries' assertion of no concessions is not an isolated statement, but part of a broader sequence of strategic moves, both for negotiation and for political image positioning. Immediate causes. First, disagreement over specific policies. The Democratic Party wants to ensure that public health care programs are not cut. This is one of their political pillars, especially important for maintaining trust among low and middle-income voters. By contrast, Republicans see reducing spending and avoiding the expansion of welfare as their top priority. Second, the effect of the deadline. October 1 functions as a collision point, forcing both sides to make decisions. This situation is often compared to a chicken game, in which both sides drive cars towards each other, and whichever swerves first is considered weaker. Underlying causes. First, the financial structure of the United States. Continuous budget deficits for decades have caused public debt to soar. This turns every budget negotiation into a debate over fiscal responsibility, where no side wants to be labeled as reckless spenders. Second, political polarization. Since the early 21st century, the ideological gap between the two parties has grown wider. Research by the Pew Research Center shows that the proportion of members of Congress willing to cross party lines in their votes has almost disappeared. This makes compromise highly unlikely. Third, the international context. The U.S. remains the world's largest economy, and the U.S. dollar retains its role as the dominant reserve currency. Therefore, any sign of fiscal instability raises global concerns, from government bond markets to exchange rates.
Direct consequences. Economy. A shutdown slows GDP growth, causes stock market volatility, and weakens business confidence. Politics. Both parties risk being blamed by voters. If the shutdown drags on, the side perceived as the cause will suffer major reputational damage. Society. Hundreds of thousands of civil servants are furloughed without pay, and people's livelihoods are affected. Healthcare, education, and food security services risk disruption. Long-term consequences. International credibility. Repeated budget deadlocks may erode confidence in America's governance capacity. Borrowing costs. If investors view the U.S. political system as unstable, government bond yields may arise, further aggravating the public debt burden. The future of American democracy? Excessive polarization and repeated budget crises may increase doubts about the U.S. democracy's ability to self-correct. Jeffries' statement that the Democratic Party will not yield in the face of a government shutdown highlights the complex interconnection between fiscal policy, political strategy, and public trust in a modern democracy. Lessons learned are: the budget is not only an economic tool, but also a political weapon used by parties to consolidate positions and bargain for power. Political polarization can turn technical issues into national crises, with consequences spreading to the global economy. An open question for us: are budget crises like this unique to the United States in this period, or do they reflect a universal problem of modern democracies, that when political polarization intensifies, even essential decisions can become deadlocked?